So we've decided to put a surgical team and crew into a submarine, reduce it way down in size, and inject it into an artery.
You mean I'm going along?
As part of the crew, yes.
Wait a minute. They can't shrink me.
Our miniaturizer can shrink anything.
But I don't want to be miniaturized.
All right, Ken Spriggs here with part 16 of my Proteus build, and I'm doing some more work on the brain base, nailing down some of the concepts. It's a little tricky because there's no real pattern for this. It isn't like building a spaceship or building a building or something like that. And even with the footage from the movie, you don't get a clear shot. If you look at different images, it looks very different. So I'm going with themes and ideas and doing a little bit of license of my own. So I think I'm finally getting it nailed down to what I want it to be. A lot of good progress on this video. Some of the techniques I've come up with are working out really well, such as my honeycomb rubber stamp. So I'll show you the use of that here in a little bit. The materials I'm kind of set on. Same with my brain curtains. I'm getting those down to where I want them to be. Just hashing out some of the lighting and some of the things like that, which are a little trickier. So let me go ahead and get to it, and we'll see what we got accomplished this week here. All right, so I got some items in the mail today to further use with my diorama for the brain, and to help light it up. And I've gotten some from this company before, from eBay. It's a seller. I'm not sure that it's a company per se, but they have some really cool items. These are fiber optic pre-wired units. Two of them are white, two of them are blue. And they just have a tube that has the LED in it, and that tube is darkened, of course. So you can roll up the fiber optics and stick them down into the tube to light up a bunch of them. And I also got some a little bit thicker fiber optic. This is 0.75 millimeter, and it's 100 feet of it. So they're reasonably priced, which is nice that you can get these from them. The idea, let me get that open. We'll show you what that looks like here. Okay, so it's fairly thin. It's not super thick, but it's not real fragile either. And it's clear. So what I want to do is I'm going to incorporate some fiber optic underneath this mesh and have like the tip of it just lit up, maybe protruding a little bit through the mesh, and put several pieces throughout it. And some will be white, some will be blue. And then these particular ones, I have some of these already that are steady. I have some that are blinking. These particular ones are flickering. They flicker. So it'll give me more of that view of the flickering lights on the brain walls throughout it. So I can have those positioned throughout these, and then down through the bottom and wired into the base of the styrofoam, and then gathered together and put into the flashers here. So okay, so those, along with the chaser lights that I showed earlier in another video, will give the effect of the flickering brain impulses throughout the walls of the brain there. So this will help me work further towards that and get some more of these curtains done here. All right, I began an initial test with my rubber stamp that I made for the honeycomb. And as I did before, I just use a cheap sponge, and I can rinse it out and reuse it. And I'm using some flat flesh as the paint in a bowl, and I dab it in, and I just dab it on top of it to get a little more control, so it doesn't fill in all the little holes and cause some of these to be solid. So a little disadvantage of this is they're so small, it kind of acts like a punch in a way, and if I did it too hard, it pulled some little pieces out, as you can see, punched out some sections. So I have to kind of do it a little lighter but make sure that I press firmly, but just not too much, and it's going through to the wood, so I can clean that up, and that won't be seen anyway. All right, so let me show you how that's going to look once I do this, and I think this process will work well. And the goal is to do it over a large sheet of this, and I might even glue 2 sheets together to make it a little stronger, a little durable. We'll see. But what I want to do now is put it on top of the styrofoam. I'll show you how that's going to work. All right, so the main idea that I want to have is that I can contour it. Put the light on there. So for example, I can line it up with this edge here and then just press it into the contours just like so. And that's going to work really well. And so that'll give you the pattern but over irregular figures as well. And I can do it with the whole surface of this and these parts over here as well. So I think that's going to work out good. And then I still haven't decided if it'd be easier to just dab the little red dot while this is all flat before I glue it down or not. And then what I'll do is use the spray adhesive that I showed you from Elmer's and just spray on that section. And this is just a strip, but they'll be bigger of a bigger section. So I'll kind of map out one that would fit over all of this, for example. Spray it down with some spray adhesive, glue it on down, make sure it adheres into all the different molds. And then it'll just pick up that little design and carry it across different areas. So I think that's going to work out well. So let me try some bigger sheets. Maybe, like I said, put 2 together to see if I can get some strength to it. All right, here's a finished sheet of this. It's got imperfections in it, and even though I double glued a section, a few pieces did break through, which is okay. Once I get it glued down, the whole point of this is it's not going to be perfect. It's organic, so it'll be just fine, and there'll be missing sections, and I can even weather them and make them match in. So I made that for the one side of the base. Let me go ahead, and I am going to put the red dots in first just to get those done. It's easier when it's flat like this. So let me get that done, and then we'll fit it on and see if we can get one of the pieces completed. All right, so I got a large section of this done with the red dots. It's rather tedious work. I'm going through with a little piece of brass tubing and some red paint from the cap and just literally dabbing each one of these on one at a time. So it's coming along, maybe about 1/5 of the way there. But let me put it on top of that and I'll show you what that effect's going to be once I'm done. Alright, so this will then be glued down to the styrofoam and then top coated with the light buff, the flat buff from Tamiya. The nice part as well is, like I said, is I can contour it right into the styrofoam once I glue it in place, and it'll maintain the design, but it will hold the contours. So this whole piece is probably going to start over here. This is the side I'm going to work on, so I made it large enough to accommodate it. So there's some mistakes, of course, but these will be fine once it's all glued in place and I get a top coat of buff on top of it. It will be fine. I'm working on maybe some kind of a clear coat as well to cover it up. So I'll keep working on this. Once I get this piece done, I want to go ahead and adhere it onto this whole ridge right here and contour it to that ridge and get that completed. And as long as that works just fine, I'll work on some different sections. I'll probably keep these all separate, so I'll have one for this ridge, one for the whole center canyon up here, and possibly a couple for this, since I have the little groove for the Proteus and a lot of detail here, so I might break that up. In addition, I'm going to have some around the edges, and what I might do in the edges is just those ones I might just glue down the actual material and then stamp it. We'll see. Most likely just keep the same process going. So alright, so that's coming along pretty good. Let's get that finished and we'll get that going. All right, and after those time lapse there, you can see this is my final product. Quite a lot of repetitious work, but I like how it's rough and uneven and organic. It'll go on really nicely as far as being the blood cells there. Not the blood cells, the skin cells in the brain there. Let me put this on real quick and I'll show you how that's going to look on the base. All right, now as I said, I double layered this one, and so it's thicker. I think it's a little too thick for some of these patterns. I want to see the pattern a little more delineated, so I'm going to use this instead in the center, this little canyon part, so I can overlap it, and I can glue this down on the front of it to cover that front part, and then form fit the rest of it in up to here. The back part there, I can either augment it or I can have other things, because I'm going to have the brain curtain sticking up here anyway, so I don't think it'll have to go back quite that far. So as long as it fills this main canyon, which it does, I can go ahead and start getting that adhered into place. And it's fairly flat up through this part, so the double thickness will work fine. And then I can get that painted and see how that's going to start looking and get some ideas for the rest of this. All right, coming along really well here. Okay, so here is the center section there glued down onto the styrofoam, and I use some spray adhesive from Elmer's, and I've let that dried. So if you take a look here, you can see I molded it down in the front there, and the rest of it will be the same. It'll come down to the bottom of this base, and I have a little bit overlapping on the right there, but it won't really be seen as much because that's going to have the brain sections, brain curtains that are collapsed over top of it. So possibly put some grooves in here, and then these will be collapsed because the Proteus crashed into it and smashed them down. There'll be some on the left side as well, but this side will be nice and attached. And then I can continue up along the ridge with some other pieces as well and fill in these gaps up here. So that worked out really well. It's on there nice and solid. It gives it a nice pattern. I still have to paint it, so that'll be the next thing I'll do, is put a coat of buff on it, flat buff. And then there might be some other highlighting that we can do on there as well to make it look more like the human body. I am glad I went with the smaller little pattern versus the larger one. That worked out a lot better. So I'm glad I took that route as opposed to using the large ones. It looks a little more realistic. It's a little more detailed as well, so I like that. Okay, so we'll get some buff on that and see how that turns out as well. So here it is with a coating of the flat buff on it, and it was a little darker than I wanted, so I did a slight mix of some flat flesh and some white, probably about half and half. Sprayed some of that over top of it, and started getting some cracks and wrinkles, which at first kind of concerned me, but now I'm looking at it and thinking, no, not at all. This is what this ought to be. This is an organic structure, so it should definitely have some big fissures and cracks in it, and some creased, some ridges and things like that. So what I did is I took some of the pieces were starting to come up a bit, so I sprayed it again with some of the spray adhesive over top of it to seal it all down and harden it. I'm gonna let that dry for a while, for several hours, and then what I think I'm gonna do is do a really thin red wash, actually, to bring out some more highlights of those red dots in the middle of the cells, and just give it the idea that there's blood flowing through here and that sort of thing, so it'll fill in some of these fissures and things like that. So I think that'll look pretty cool. And I left the front of it a lot less detailed to kind of show off that cell structure, and it gives it the hint of it too. It brings out the rest of it, so I think it's going to be really nice. I'm going to let that dry now and harden, and once it does, I'm going to get a wash on it And that'll pretty much finish up this main section here for now. And then I can start working on the rest of the sections to see how those go as well. So if, God forbid, and hopefully not, if I don't like it or it doesn't turn out, I can peel this whole thing off and do it again. I don't want to, that's a lot of work. A lot of work in stamping that, putting those red dots in there. So I don't think I'll have to. But I want to get at least one section finished, this main part, the way I want it to look, and if it looks good, then I'll be ready to progress on to the rest of it. Okay, all right. All right, so I'm going to work a little bit on some more of the walls. I did get the fiber optic in, as I showed earlier, and the lights for them. So I'm going to try to create a wall. And here's a section of plexiglass that I cut out with a rough shape. And I have my mesh material. I have the sheer satiny white, which I'm going to go with. And I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes in this, and then I want to get these fiber optics glued onto it and then covered with the mesh material to see if I can get those lit up and see what they're going to look like. Sorry about that. All right, so I have 3 fiber optic strands glued onto the plexiglass sheet with some holes through it using my extra thin Tamiya cement. I already have the fiber optics just kind of stuck to it to kind of give you an idea. It's hard to tell from this angle, but you can see the little bit of blue glow there. And I have blue and I have white. All right, and they come out through the bottom. So now I need to go ahead and adhere the sheer white fabric and the mesh fabric onto it with some spray glue, and let's see how that works out for me. All right, so I decided on a little different approach. Instead of having them just glued onto the front that's going to be covered with material, I drilled a little hole through the plastic and ran the fiber optics through to the other side. You can see them sticking out there a little bit. So, and I'll poke them through the material so they won't have to compete with the material and the glue and all that to shine. So we'll go ahead and do it that way instead, and then the front edge that I'll be putting it on will be smooth. All right. All right, and here's the finished brain curtain with some blue around it, and I do have the fiber optics in place and a flashing connector on it right now. The flickering one didn't flicker a whole lot. I think it would look nicer if I had several different flashers, and I do have several different ones, and I can alternate which ones are flashing, make it look that way. The fiber optics are kind of shining through the back of it, so I do want to work on possibly a better idea, maybe making these double thick and bringing them through the back or something of that nature. But I'm still kind of working on it. But I do have a little closer to what I want to do there. That's actually a little more blue if I get a better look at it. Okay, but alternate flashing would be kind of cool as well if I can get that to work on there. All right, now I also wanted to show, here is the blue on there. It does look kind of cool, but it could be a little brighter, and they don't really flicker that much. You can kind of see that they're flickering. Yeah, just a little bit. Now it's possible too, I'm just using a 9-volt battery right now with these, testing these out with the 9-volt battery. So they're rated to go to 12 volts, and this is probably a worn out battery as well. So what I probably need to do is get an adapter, 12-volt adapter, which is what I'll be using ultimately with all of the lights on this this base. And I could probably get a brighter look. Plus, you can also see those fiber optics glowing through it, which I don't really want so much. I mean, it almost looks sort of like some veins or something, but that's, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. I want to come up with a better way, possibly an even thicker, like a space in between them, so I can mask off the fiber optics. But I think they'll work for what I want them to ultimately. Just not crazy about those flickering so much. Yeah, it barely looks like it's flickering at all. Alright, so a little closer to what I want to do, but not quite there yet. Alright, so I'm trying a bit of a red wash. I'm using Tamiya's Clear Red. And I watered it down quite a bit. And you can see I did it on that beginning part there and that little ridge where the breakup is happening. And it does really give it a nicer look and highlights it a bit. Gives it a little more of those red highlights. It brings out the red in it. So I'm going to continue on that and do the rest of this whole section and see how that looks. Alright. Here's the finished section that I put the red wash on. I think that really highlights it a lot better, makes it look a lot more organic, like flesh or skin inside the brain there. So it definitely added more wrinkles and more texture to it. So so I think that's working out pretty good. What I want to do is add a little bit more of a wash of a highlight of just red, flat red from Tamiya to bring out some of the more creviced areas, more obvious areas, and add some accents to it. So let me go ahead and give that a try and see what that looks like as well. Alright, so I did some highlights, as you can see, with some actually some dark hall red, or just hall red actually, and made it look a little more accented with the little damage right there, the damage right here. Looking more and more like an injured body, which is kind of what it is. So we're inside the brain where an injury happened. He had a blood clot, which we'll get on the end there. So I'm liking how that's turning out. I'm going to let that just settle and dry for a bit and solidify, everything come together. The paint started to pull up a little bit of the glue. That's why you're seeing more wrinkles. I'm hoping that once that paint dries, it will then go back to a more rigid state, which is what I want it to be. So I'm going to just leave everything be for now. A lot of nice highlighting. I think that's going to look really good as far as the body part, the flesh part in there, sort of at the base of the brain. I really like how that damage looks. That looks really cool. So that was a good idea with the wash. It definitely brought out more of the color. I wasn't really liking just that really dull buff color. It was washing out all the colors. So the wash definitely brought back a lot more of the red highlights for sure. Added more detail to it. Added that damage right there, which looks really amazing. Looks very organic, very damaged. So I like how that's turning out. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video for this week. Work some more on the light curtains and the lights. Come up with a solid plan on that. This looks like the way I'm going to go as far as this base is concerned. So I'll have to make some more of these panels with the stamp and with the little red dots. Get the rest of these covered where I need to and get those painted as well, and then have that base all ready to go as far as the bottom floor part of it is going to be. Alright, I will see everybody next week, and you have a good time building your models.